That changed my life. It, it put me on a path I never thought I would be on, which is the path of not practicing politics but teaching it.
Born in Austria to an Iranian father and an Austrian mother, Manoutchehr Eskandari-Qajar has the unique distinction of being an Austrian citizen with familial connections to the 19th century royal family of Persia. A chance discovery of the Austrian Fulbright Student Program led him to apply, and decades later, Manoutchehr is grateful for the unexpected path the Fulbright Program led him down in Santa Barbara, California. We recently sat down with Manoutchehr to discuss his Fulbright experience, how the U.S. has changed since his grant in 1980, and his most recently published book.
I was at the University of Vienna. I was studying political science, international relations, and international law. My professor in international law and international relations, Professor Fisher, um, took me on a study abroad to Cambridge with him. And he kind of encouraged study abroad and kind of looking beyond Vienna. And so, completely randomly, I walked by America House, and there was a billboard there with flyers, detachable flyers, and it was an announcement to apply for Fulbright. So I came home and I told my wife, what do you think about me applying for Fulbright to go to America? And she was delighted, because in those days Vienna was difficult for foreigners, especially if you didn't know your way around. And her family was not there. I was her only family in Vienna. Her family had moved to California because of the revolution, many of them. So it was a confluence of events, you know. So I took the flyer, applied, and the head of the commission, the interview committee, was extremely kind. It was 4:30 in the afternoon. I was the last interviewee, and they were very relaxed. And after we had our conversation, the uh, chair of the committee said, "Well, if we grant you a fellowship, where would you like to go?" And I just blurted out Santa Barbara, um, because my wife's brother was here, and she would have been very happy. And the chair looked at me puzzled, and he said, "Santa Barbara." And then he threw up his hands and he said, "Why not? If you can get acceptance to the University of Santa Barbara, why not?" And I could not point to Santa Barbara on a map, frankly. But I said it because her family was here. And next thing I know, they kindly gave me the scholarship. That changed my life. It, it put me on a path I never thought I would be on, which is the path of not practicing politics but teaching. I had no expectations of America other than, like you, what you see on TV, what you see in the movies, the palm trees in Beverly Hills, those kinds of things. I had no expectation, nor did I know anything of life in America. It was the election of Carter Reagan when we arrived here. And it was a time when the Iranians had taken Americans hostage in Tehran in the embassy. So it was a very difficult time. And as I said, we came as Austrians. Obviously, I'm Austrian. My wife got Austrian citizenship when we got married. But, this is Iranian. And when we came here, I was very apprehensive that Americans might react negatively towards someone who looks Iranian, whose name is definitely Iranian. We were a bit apprehensive, but California and Santa Barbara were extremely welcoming. It was just wonderful. I mean, we had We felt like we had landed in paradise. Vienna in those days was cold, gray. The buildings were gray. The people were gray. It's not the Vienna of today. The Vienna of 1979 was still a bit angry and kind of, depressed and depressive. We got here, there were blue skies, there were palm trees, there were happy people, there were beaches. And it was a completely different scene. It almost felt like you're on vacation the whole time. So those were my early impressions of America. We were a bit apprehensive, but Americans were very. I mean, we made friends immediately here. They were all extremely friendly. My professors were very welcoming. It was really a great transition. America in general, as everyone now knows, is very divided today. It's divided almost on um, impassable lines. You're either red or you're blue. There's very little in between. The same phenomenon is happening all across Western Europe as well. And that has to do with the international stresses that exist in the system, the wars. America has been involved in many of them, the destruction of entire countries that has happened as a result of the wars, and then the displacement of peoples, which has put a huge, huge burden on Western Europe. The same thing is happening here. In the 80s, when we were here, you could joke about politics with people whose politics were different from yours, and you could have a good laugh. Joking about politics today might draw, kind of a serious nod, and people get uncomfortable and want to move away. So that's how it's changed. It's very unfortunate because you need civic discourse amongst people who are of different opinions. And I see that in Europe and I see it here. It's less and less possible. People are very much in their corners. Fulbright allowed me to come to America. America was not on my horizon. So it opened that perspective. I owe my 44 years here to Fulbright. And I have spoken about Fulbright to my students ever since I started teaching in 1986 at UCSB, and then the rest of my career since 92 at Santa Barbara City College. And I've taken them on study abroad. Um, I believe I mentioned it to you. My last study abroad was in Vienna in 2019. I took my students to Vienna. And now one of my students is applying to Fulbright, and she's applying for a scholarship to go to Salamanca in Spain on a global studies. So I think I've finally managed to come full circle. Because of my own family background, I was always interested in Iran, and I started writing articles about 19th century Persia. I've published now 3 books on 19th century Persia. The book that I showed you is the latest one. But I've also shifted my attention to my Austrian background. My mom keeps reminding me almost every day, remember, you're 50% Austrian. so, so in honoring my mother and honoring that heritage also, I thought I'd like to write a book about Austrian Persian relations in the 19th century. In English, there is no such book. And as I was working on, and I'm going to be publishing that book, it's going to be a larger book in 25, 26. As I was working on this book, I was working obviously on the Persian court, visiting Vienna, because Vienna was one of the centers everybody visited. And I realized that the Viennese photographers in the 19th century were superstars. Everybody who was somebody wanted to be photographed by them. Paris and Vienna became the centers for photography when photography kind of had its day. And the Viennese photographers were absolutely, I mean, this was the glam of glams. So because of these two connections, my family connection to Vienna, my birth, my home, and then my family connection to Iran and to the royal family in the 19th century, I felt it would be time to kind of highlight that. But the book that I'm writing, the larger book I'm writing, is about Austrians who have come to Iran and Iranians, Persians who have come to Vienna. There was suddenly no place for Austrian photographers who didn't do any of those things. They just photographed people in Vienna. And I thought, after all of this research, and it's a beautiful research. I have a collection of photographs that I have collected over the years also that are in this book. I thought it would be a shame to just let that go because it doesn't fit the theme of the book, Austrians in Iran and Iranians in Austria. So I thought, why not? Why not just publish it so that it remains as a little gem, and not let go of it? And I did that. I'm very happy about it. As a matter of fact, I have over 100 photographs from my own collection and collection of colleagues in this book, very nicely kind of tying the Austrian photographers, these superstars, to their clients, their sitters, the Persian kings who came to Vienna, and their retinue, the members of their court who came and were photographed by these people. So it was a labor of love, and I wanted it to be out there both as a nod to my Austrian heritage and my Iranian heritage. My advice is the same as I gave to my students all these years: cast your net wide, apply to any and all, because people don't know their own potential. And I always gave my own example. The last thing I would have I would have been shocked if someone as I was doing my magister at the University of Vienna, would have said, you know what? I think you'll end up in California and one day you'll be a professor here. And the reason you go to California is because of a scholarship that you received from Fulbright. I would have just dismissed them out of hand. We don't know our own potential. So one needs to cast one's net wide. And if you limit yourself, well, the force of gravity will limit you further. But if you open yourself to opportunities come from corners you don't even know exist. As I said, I was walking to my professor's office on Rathausstraße, and I went by America House, and I just looked in. I didn't even know. I looked in, and there was this flyer. Changed my life. And if I had said to myself, well, I will never qualify. What am I even thinking of? Um, I would not be here. So my advice is, go out there, young man, see the world, or young lady, see the world.